Hello, my friends. Today marks the first day of the so-called ceasefire. Let's see how it actually plays out because the Russian side already stopped drone strikes during the night. The big question now is how Ukraine will respond since both Zelensky and the US had proposed a 30-day pause, which Putin rejected. Still, overnight, Ukrainian soldiers reported that there is no real ceasefire along the front lines so far. Well, then, Putin's 3-day ceasefire agreed with no one has officially begun. Hopefully, the mistakes of the previous ceasefire won't be repeated. The Russians shouldn't be allowed to quietly take over gray zones or build up forces under the cover of a so called truce. In the first 7 minutes of this ceasefire, the Russians already launched several MLRS strikes on frontline areas and logistics bases. Ground battles haven't stopped and won't stop. In Pokrovsk, Toretsk, Chasiv Yar, Kostantinivka, Sumy, Kursk, Belgorod, Kupyansk, and Lyman directions, not a trace of silence, because these swamp-dwelling bastards always lie. Meanwhile, throughout yesterday, Ukrainian drones kept flying over Russian territory. Air defense systems were active in the Moscow region, and explosions were heard. Russians are shocked for the second day in a row. They're facing airport disruptions and flights have been suspended. Friends, let me know your thoughts in the comments. Now, here is what Peskov had to say that Ukrainian strikes on Russian territory supposedly prove that the war must go on.
How do you assess the actions of the Kyiv regime yesterday and today, knowing that world leaders are arriving in Moscow, and yet they still pull this?
The Kyiv regime is well aware of President Putin's initiative to declare a temporary ceasefire for the holidays. And still, they haven't made a single statement indicating any readiness to join the initiative. We've heard many vague and contradictory statements at various levels before, and now we're seeing their true actions. They continue to reveal their true nature, their unwillingness for peace, their readiness for terrorism. These strikes on civilian targets, or even attempted strikes, cannot be called anything else. And they justify continuing the special military operation.
Now, let's move straight to the situation on the border, where Ukrainian forces continue advancing into Russian territory. As before, Ukraine isn't commenting on this development, so let's take a look at what the Russian side is saying today. Russian paratroopers are engaged in combat with the Ukrainians in Tyotkino, Kursk region, trying to drive out the Ukrainians. Airborne assault troops are clearing Chapayev Street in Tyotkino, where earlier Ukrainian infantry managed to break through. Intense fighting is ongoing. Skirmishes are also breaking out along the state border, where Ukrainian militants have been trying for 3 days to breach into Russia from the direction of Budka in Sumy region. Near Novy Put, all Ukrainian advances have been repelled and a significant amount of armored equipment has been destroyed. The Ukrainians continue moving reserves toward the border area, although they haven't been deployed yet. New offensive attempts using these reserves are expected in the coming days. Unfortunately, Russian forces are still managing to destroy Ukrainian equipment, so the situation remains extremely tense. More and more videos are surfacing every day confirming this, but so far there is been no major breakthrough. In the last 24 hours, the front line remains unchanged. For context, yesterday it was Russian sources themselves who confirmed that Ukrainian forces advanced 450 meters and 200 meters near the village of Tyotkino, and that's where things currently stand. These are essentially the results of 3 full days of attacks. Meanwhile, Vance stated that Russia may want to stop the war, but their demands for a ceasefire are unreasonably high. I wouldn't say the Russians are completely uninterested in resolving this, he said. It's more that they are putting forward certain demands and expecting concessions in exchange for ending the conflict. Trump was asked why Vance said that, and he replied that we are approaching a decisive moment.
Russia was asking for too much to end the war. Given that, do you still have confidence that
When did he say that?
earlier this morning?
Well, it's possible that he's right. He may know some things that, because I've been dealing with this and some other things, but we are getting to a point where some decisions are going to have to be made. I'm not happy about it. I'm not happy about it. Okay.
Overall, Trump seems to think there is still no good news, and he's clearly dissatisfied with how things are going. Meanwhile, fighting on the front lines continues, so let's turn to the Sumy and Kursk directions. For now, Russian forces are still unable to fully push Ukrainian troops out of Russian territory, so the battles continue. At the same time, some claims have started circulating that they supposedly entered the area around the village of Lokhnya. However, there is no solid confirmation of that yet, so we'll have to wait and see how the situation develops. In the Kharkiv direction, activity remains minimal for now, and the Russians are not conducting any assaults. However, fighting continues in Vovchansk, where Russian forces are once again trying to break through to the Vovchansky Khutori area, but they've made no progress and there have been no changes over the past 24 hours. In the Dvorichna direction, things are quiet at the moment. No new assaults are being carried out, only ongoing shelling. In the Kupyansk direction, assaults on Petropavlivka are being reported, but there is no major activity elsewhere. All attacks are being successfully repelled, so the front line remains unchanged. In the Borova direction, assaults continue near Boguslavka and Zeleny High, and Russian forces are trying to push through near Raigorodka. Fighting has also reportedly resumed near the village of Nadia. However, there are no changes to the front line so far. The battles are ongoing. In the Lyman direction, Russian forces remain highly active. They are storming Zarichne, Ямполівка, Колодязі, Зелена Долина, and Lipove. Although Russians are already claiming full control of the village, assaults are ongoing in Ritko Dub and Novy Mir. There have been no changes over the past 24 hours, but the battles remain extremely intense. So the Russians are doing everything they can to break through the front line. In the Siversk direction, it's currently calm. All of Russia's previous attacks failed, and they haven't launched any new ones, so the front line here remains unchanged. In the Chasiv Yar direction, Russian forces continue trying to break through in the central part of the city, and near Kurdyumivka, shelling also hasn't stopped, but they've made no gains along the front line. In the Toretsk direction, the situation keeps getting worse. Russian troops are attacking Ukrainian positions in Toretsk, with fighting also reported near Dachne and Druzhba. They are also storming Kalinove and heavily shelling Stara Mykolаївка, Zorya, and Yablonivka. There are also reports of strikes on Novoolenivka, and Russian sources claim they've already captured the outskirts of the village. Looking at the broader picture, it's clear that shelling has now reached Poltavka and Rusin Yar. Considering that Russian forces have been gradually advancing in these two areas recently, it seems likely their next push will focus there. This suggests their broad goal is to flank and reach the rear of Kostantinivka. Still, over the past 24 hours, there have been no changes to the front line, though Russian activity in this sector is extremely intense. In the Pokrovsk direction, assaults are also ongoing, around 80 attacks in the past 24 hours. Russian forces continue advancing on Novoalexandrivka, Udachne, Kotline, Zvirove, and are attempting to break through to the outskirts of Pokrovsk. They are storming areas around Chunishine, Dachinske, Lysivka, Промінь, Миролюбівка, Малинівка, and Nova Poltavka. The area is also experiencing heavy shelling. According to geolocated footage, there is confirmation of Russian assaults on Novoolenivka, and it's highly likely they've achieved some success there. At the same time, Russian sources claim they're attacking Alexandropol. The Russian army is advancing on a broad front toward Kostantinivka. The Russian flag has been raised over Novolenivka. There is ongoing fighting in Alexandropol and Nova Poltavka. In the Kostantinivka direction, after storming, the Russian flag was raised in the northern part of Novolenivka. Clearing operations continue on the outskirts. The Russian army is storming Alexandropol and Nova Poltavka, pushing toward the center of the latter. The situation remains tense, and Ukrainian military analysts report that Russian forces are storming along a broad front. Overall, the situation here is indeed very difficult, and the Ukrainian General Staff confirms the intensity of Russian attacks. We'll have to see how things develop, but for now, stopping the advance has proven challenging. In the Kurakhove direction, Russian forces are storming Kotlerivka, Preobrazhenka, Troitske, Oleksiivka, and Odradne. The situation here is also tough. Russian sources claim they are advancing in Kotlerivka, but the Ukrainian side hasn't confirmed this, so we hope these are premature statements by the Russians. There is still no video evidence of their progress, but either way, the fighting is fierce. Ukrainian defenders have shown videos of Russian troops being eliminated near Troitsk, where daily assaults taking place. Ukrainian sources confirm that the situation there is indeed problematic. The Russians have begun storming Troitsk. Most of the village is now under the control of the Russians. Our fighters are trying to slow them down, but even drones aren't helping much. The Russians have a lot of manpower. They try to hide, find cover, stay still until it's quiet, and then begin moving again. After that, a battle breaks out for about 2 hours, followed by artillery and airstrikes near the border with Dnipropetrovsk region. The assaults have intensified, and we have to hold on with the forces we have. We simply must hold, otherwise, a new front will open for us. In the Velika Novosilka direction, Russian forces continue assaults on the villages of Shevchenko and Vilnepole. Fierce fighting is ongoing near Novosilka and Novopil, and Russian units are attempting to advance across open fields from Rivnopil. However, Ukrainian forces continue to repel all attacks successfully, often showing the destruction of Russian personnel and equipment. Despite the high intensity of combat, there have been no changes to the front line in the past 24 hours, though the situation remains extremely tense. In the Gulay Pole direction, attacks on the village of Vysoke persist. Russian troops are also conducting heavy shelling in the area. While it appears they may intend to advance in this direction as well, it's also possible these actions are aimed at diverting Ukrainian reserves from other fronts. Despite several days of fighting, the front line remains unchanged, and all attacks have been repelled so far. In the Zaporizhia direction, Russian forces maintain a high level of activity, launching assaults on something wrong. One moment. Okay, just believe me. So they are launching assaults on Novoandriivka, Mali Щербаки, Stepove, and Kamyansk. Despite these continuous attacks, Ukrainian defenders have successfully repelled all assaults, and there have been no changes to the front line. In the Kherson direction, Russian troops continue to shell the right bank of the Dnipro River and conduct attacks on the islands in the river delta. However, no significant breakthroughs, such as mass landing on the right bank, have occurred in the past 24 hours, and the situation remains stable. Meanwhile, reports indicate that Russian forces have begun using North Korean multiple launch rocket systems against Ukrainian positions. The projectiles used in this system reportedly weigh around 300 to 400 kilograms and have a maximum range of 43 to 60 kilometers. The warhead of the fragmentation version weighs approximately 90 kilograms. In addition, North Korea has tested guided 240 millimeter artillery rockets with an extended range of up to 80 kilometers. This clearly signals that Russia is facing shortages in its own arsenal and is increasingly relying on foreign supplied weaponry. At the same time, Vance has stated that Russia and Ukraine must sit at the negotiation table or the United States will withdraw from the mediation process.
Now, what the president has said is that he will walk away if he thinks he's not making progress. And I think that, about once every 4 or 5 weeks, you will hear some American official or sometimes multiple American officials say, this is a week where we need to make another step. And in particular, the step that we would like to make right now is we would like both the Russians and the Ukrainians to actually agree on some basic guidelines for sitting down and talking to one another. Obviously, the United States is happy to participate in those conversations, but it's very important for the Russians and the Ukrainians to start talking to one another. We think that is the next big step that we would like to take. And we think the next step in the negotiation is to try to close that gulf. We think it's probably impossible for us to mediate this entirely without at least some direct negotiation between the two. And so that's what we focus on. But I'm not yet a pessimist on this. I mean, obviously, the Russians and the Ukrainians are not there yet because the fighting is still going on.
And indeed, one side would need to suffer a serious defeat to acknowledge the need for peace talks. As it stands, neither side sees itself as having lost, and both still have the capacity to continue fighting. That is why the war goes on, and neither is Russian to bring it to an end. Friends, be sure to share your thoughts in the comments. And that's all from me, so please don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell to stay updated on all the latest news. Thank you for watching and see you next time. Bye bye.